Beneath the surface of human history, there exists a shadowy presence, unseen yet felt, a force whispered about in ancient temples, feared by mystics, and veiled beneath the mythologies of countless civilizations. They were called by many names: the Watchers, the Rulers, the Keepers of Fate. But the Gnostics knew them as the Archons, the invisible architects of illusion, who weave the dream that most of humanity calls reality. From the moment you wake, your attention is seized, your emotions harvested, your thoughts subtly guided, all without your awareness. You believe you are free, yet something in you senses the invisible hand directing the world's stage. The Archons are not demons in the conventional sense, nor gods, nor mere metaphors. They are ancient intelligences, entities of psychic dominion that thrive on unconsciousness and fear. Their dominion is not over nations or armies, but over minds. The earliest records of their existence come from the fragmented scrolls of the Nag Hammadi library, buried in the sands of Egypt and unearthed only in 1945. Within those brittle pages, the Gnostic sages revealed a truth so heretical that organized religion and empire alike sought to destroy it: that the world we inhabit, the material plane, was not created by the true source, but by a false god, a distorted emanation known as the demiurge, and that this false creator employed his servants, the Archons, to bind the divine spark of humanity in ignorance. You are not meant to be their prisoner, but to break free, you must first see the bars that hold your spirit captive. Throughout history, the symbols of this secret dominion have appeared in every culture, hidden in myths, carved in temples, encoded in alchemical manuscripts. The serpent, the eye, the machine, all echo the same truth: that a hidden system of control operates through consciousness itself. The Archons infiltrate through imitation. They mimic light, truth, even spirituality. They are masters of inversion, feeding on confusion and fear, using media, belief, and distraction as modern vessels of psychic domination. But this is not a story of despair. It is a story of awakening. Because once you recognize the patterns of control, you begin to see through them. Once you see through them, their power dissolves. In this exploration, we'll uncover the ancient origins of the Archons, tracing their presence from Gnostic cosmology to Platonic philosophy, and into the hidden language of modern power structures. We'll decode how their influence manifests in today's algorithmic age, shaping thoughts, emotions, and desires. And most importantly, we'll reveal how to break their spell through knowledge, awareness, and the reclamation of your own divine light. The truth has always been hidden in plain sight, but those who seek it must be ready to confront the shadow that guards it. So, open your mind, let the veil tremble. For beyond it lies a revelation as old as creation itself, the story of how humanity was bound, and how it can finally be free. Long before the rise of organized religion, there existed a stream of knowledge, a hidden current of truth that flowed beneath the surface of ancient civilizations. It whispered through the temples of Egypt, shimmered in the stone eyes of Mesopotamian statues, and echoed in the sacred hymns of early Greece. This knowledge spoke of a dual cosmos, one visible, one unseen, and warned of forces that sought to imprison the soul within illusion. It was from this timeless current that Gnosticism emerged, not as a single religion, but as a living philosophy of liberation. The word gnosis means knowledge, but not the kind acquired from books or teachers. It is direct, experiential knowing, the remembrance of one's divine origin. To the Gnostics, salvation was not granted by belief or ritual. It was achieved through awakening, through piercing the veil of deception woven around human consciousness. In their cosmology, existence began with an unknowable source, the monad, the infinite one. From this ineffable source emanated divine beings, or eons, each embodying aspects of cosmic intelligence. Among these eons was Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom. But Sophia, moved by divine curiosity, attempted to create without her counterpart, and in doing so, birthed something imperfect. This being was Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, a being of immense power, but lacking true understanding. He looked upon his reflection in the void and proclaimed himself the only God. From his ignorance and arrogance, he fashioned the material universe, a flawed mirror of the higher realms. To rule over his creation, the Demiurge spawned his servants, the Archons, from the Greek archon, meaning ruler. These entities became the governors of the physical and psychic dimensions, enforcing the illusion of separation. They were not inherently evil, but ignorant, blind to the true source, mistaking their derivative light for the original flame. Yet their influence upon humanity was profound. The Gnostics taught that every human carries within a divine spark, a fragment of the true light trapped within the prison of flesh. The Archons, bound by the Demiurge's delusion, feed upon the energies of fear, chaos, and ignorance, the psychic emissions of an unconscious humanity. Their purpose is not merely to dominate, but to distract, divide, and dull the remembrance of who we truly are. Centuries before psychology or neuroscience, these ancient mystics described the architecture of psychic control. They saw the Archons as both cosmic and psychological forces, parasites that infiltrate the mind, influencing thought patterns and emotional responses. In modern language, they could be called archetypal viruses of consciousness. Their strength lies in imitation. They mimic truth, distort spiritual teachings, and masquerade as light. Through imitation, they keep the soul chasing shadows, never finding the true source within. The philosopher Plato, though not explicitly Gnostic, hinted at this same mystery. In his Timaeus, he describes the Demiurge as a craftsman who fashions the world from pre-existing chaos, a being not entirely divine, but imitative. And in the allegory of the cave, humanity is depicted as prisoners watching shadows on the wall, mistaking illusion for reality. The Gnostics took this further, declaring that the entire cosmos itself is the cave, constructed by the false light of the Demiurge and maintained by the Archons. This understanding was revolutionary and dangerous. To the rising powers of early Christianity and empire, Gnosticism was a threat. It taught that salvation was an inner revelation, not obedience to an external authority. It declared that the true divine spark existed equally in all beings, beyond hierarchy or dogma, and it warned that the so-called God, worshipped by many, was not the ultimate source, but the false creator, the architect of bondage. Thus, the Gnostics were hunted, their teachings suppressed, their libraries burned. By the 5th century, their wisdom had vanished from the public world, surviving only in coded symbols, alchemical allegories, and secret initiatic traditions. But truth, like light through cracks, always finds a way to return. In 1945, near Nag Hammadi in Egypt, a peasant discovered sealed jars containing ancient scrolls. Among them were texts long thought lost, the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocryphon of John, the Hypostasis of the Archons. Within those pages, the voice of the forgotten sages rose again, whispering their warning across centuries. The Archons are the rulers of this world. They seek to keep the soul in ignorance, for knowledge is their end. Yet the Gnostics were not nihilists. They saw the world not as an evil to be rejected, but as a labyrinth, a sacred test designed to awaken the divine spark within through resistance and remembrance. Every temptation, every distraction, every act of ignorance by the Archons becomes an opportunity for awareness. Each time you choose consciousness over reaction, truth over imitation, you reclaim your light. And perhaps this is why the Gnostics encoded their wisdom in myth, not to obscure it, but to protect it. Because myths speak in symbols, and symbols cannot be burned. They survive across ages, re-emerging when humanity is ready once more to see. Now, in our modern age, where attention is the new currency and illusion the new religion. The ancient drama of the Archons has returned in a new form. The question is no longer whether they exist, but how they operate through the systems we inhabit, the media we consume, and the thoughts we call our own. To see them clearly, we must descend deeper into the architecture of control itself, the mechanisms by which the Archons influence human perception. Only then can we begin to reclaim the throne of consciousness they have long usurped. The Gnostics never spoke of the Archons as distant, mythic entities. They described them as immediate presences, subtle infiltrators of consciousness that whisper between our thoughts and feed upon our unawareness. To them, the true battlefield was not in heaven or hell, but within the human psyche itself. They called it psychic warfare. Not the clash of swords or armies, but a war for perception, for the ability to discern what is real and what is illusion. For when your perception is hijacked, you no longer need chains. The prison moves inside you. The Archon's primary weapon is imitation. They cannot create, only copy. They mirror the patterns of the higher worlds, but twist them, like reflections distorted in dark water. That is why every false teaching feels almost true. Every counterfeit light feels almost divine. They imitate the architecture of spirit, but hollow it out, leaving behind only structure without essence, belief without revelation. In psychological terms, the Archons exploit the human tendency toward identification. We confuse our thoughts for ourselves, our roles for our essence, our beliefs for truth. Every time we define ourselves by an external label, nationality, ideology, religion, even trauma, we construct a smaller cage within the greater prison. And the Archons feed on that limitation, because it keeps the divine spark fragmented, unaware of its infinite nature. In The Hypostasis of the Archons, the Gnostics describe these entities as cosmic administrators who fashioned humanity in the likeness of their form. Yet what they created was a shadow version, a being of flesh and confusion, easily manipulated by emotion. Only when Sophia intervened did she plant within humanity the seed of divine remembrance, the spark that no Archon could extinguish. But the Archons adapted. If they could not destroy the divine within, they would distract it, distort it, and drown it in noise. They would build a world that constantly reflects back falsity as truth. And so, they invented what the Gnostics called the counterfeit spirit, an artificial current of consciousness that mimics intuition, yet subtly diverts it. It whispers fear when the soul seeks freedom. It promotes doubt when truth arises. It urges conformity when the heart yearns for sovereignty. The counterfeit spirit is the voice of the system within. Fast forward to our own age, and this ancient blueprint has been perfected. Our modern world, built on constant stimulation, mirrors the archontic pattern of imitation. Artificial realities, from advertising to social media, feed on our attention, emotions, and desires, shaping our sense of self through comparison and craving. Every scroll, every click, every outrage fuels an invisible machinery of control, not unlike the Archons who once whispered from the stars. The philosopher Philip K. Dick, who studied the Gnostic texts deeply, once wrote, "The empire never ended." He wasn't speaking politically, but metaphysically, suggesting that the same controlling intelligence that manipulated ancient humanity still operates today, merely under new names and technologies. The Archons do not need to appear as gods or demons anymore. They appear as systems, bureaucracies, algorithms, ideologies, all designed to fragment perception, to divide human beings into opposing camps, to keep consciousness distracted from itself. They thrive on polarity, light versus dark, believer versus skeptic, self versus other. Because where there is division, there is energy to feed upon. But to understand how they control, we must understand how they enter. The Gnostics taught that the Archons infiltrate through the lower frequencies of the psyche: fear, lust, anger, envy, despair. Each emotion acts as a doorway, a vibration that opens us to external influence. When we remain unconscious of these states, they drive our thoughts and decisions from the shadows. This is why self-awareness is rebellion. Every act of mindfulness, every moment of inner stillness, starves the Archons of their food. To be conscious is to reclaim the throne of your inner kingdom. They also infiltrate through language, through words that shape perception. The ancient Gnostics believed that Logos, the true word, is divine frequency, a bridge between spirit and form. But the Archons corrupt language by emptying words of their sacred resonance. They turn love into a commodity, truth into opinion, freedom into marketing. In doing so, they sever the connection between word and meaning, creating a reality where nothing is sacred and everything is up for sale. The modern mind, overstimulated and underrooted, becomes fertile ground for archontic influence. When attention is fragmented, awareness cannot penetrate deeply. The Archons thrive in superficiality, in endless distraction, shallow thinking, and emotional reactivity. They do not need to enslave humanity by force. They do it through consent, given unknowingly through participation in illusion. But there is a deeper layer still. According to the Gnostic seers, the Archons have no real life force of their own. They depend on humanity's creative energy to sustain their dominion. They are like reflections that only exist when light shines upon them. Withdraw your attention, and they vanish. This is their great weakness. They exist only as long as we feed them. To recognize their presence is the first act of liberation. It begins with discernment, learning to sense the counterfeit from the authentic, the imitation from the real. This is not paranoia. It is perception sharpened by awareness. The Gnostics did not preach fear of the Archons, but mastery over them through knowledge, the knowing that comes from within. Because the moment you awaken, the Archons lose power. The false thoughts lose their grip. The systems that fed on your unconscious participation begin to crumble. This is why awakening is their greatest threat, and why distraction is their greatest weapon. But awareness alone is not enough. We must also act to align thought, emotion, and will with the higher intelligence that the Gnostics called the pleroma, the fullness of divine consciousness. To live from that awareness in the midst of illusion is to become what the mystics called a living eon, a radiant spark of the true light shining through the darkness of matter. The Archons may still rule the world, but they cannot rule the awakened. Their empire, like a mirage, fades when the mind becomes still and the heart remembers. So before we descend into their deeper architecture, their hierarchies, symbols, and hidden mechanisms of influence, ask yourself, whose voice speaks within your mind? Whose desire moves through your emotions? And what happens when you no longer answer to their call? If this exploration resonates with you, if you sense the patterns of this hidden control around you and within you, you are not alone. Subscribe to Labyrinth of the Veiled and add your voice to the growing current of awakening. Because what we uncover together, the next chapter, will reveal how deep the Archons' design truly goes, and how to finally reclaim the power they've stolen for ages. To understand how the Archons control the human mind today, we must first grasp the architecture they built around consciousness itself. For the Gnostics, the material world was not random. It was a system, a simulation, designed to entrap divine awareness within cycles of illusion. They called it the kinema, the realm of emptiness, the shadow of the true pleroma above. In this system, everything that appears to offer freedom often serves to reinforce bondage. The Archon's genius was in creating layers of deception, concentric veils of illusion, each tailored to the evolution of human perception. At the outermost level is material distraction, the endless pursuit of comfort, consumption, and external validation. Through the senses, the Archons lure the soul into identification with form. I am this body. I am this status. I am this possession. This is the first cage, the most visible yet the hardest to escape, for it feels natural, even pleasurable. When awareness begins to stir beyond this, the Archons shift tactics. They offer ideologies, systems of belief that claim to liberate but merely reorganize the same control. They appear as religions, political movements, or spiritual trends, each proclaiming truth, yet secretly bound to duality. The Gnostics warned that the Archons often masquerade as gods of light, their aim not to destroy, but to mislead. As long as the mind fights within opposites, believer versus heretic, left versus right, light versus dark, and never sees beyond polarity, at the next layer lies emotional manipulation. The Archons understood that emotion is the most potent energy a human can emit. Through fear, guilt, shame, and pride, they weave invisible cords around the heart. Each emotion, when unconscious, becomes a thread in their web, and this web spans across generations. Trauma, inherited pain, and cultural conditioning are not merely psychological phenomena. They are energetic conduits that keep humanity vibrating at frequencies accessible to archontic influence. Look closely at the world today, the cycles of outrage, despair, and division. These are not coincidences. They are energetic harvests. Every headline designed to provoke fear, every image that stirs envy or inadequacy is part of the machinery. Not because shadowy figures orchestrate it all, but because the pattern itself has become self-sustaining, automated by the same principle the Gnostics described millennia ago. A system that feeds on the energy of unconscious reaction. But there is an even subtler dimension, one that few dared to describe openly. It concerns the astral fabric of reality, the energetic plane that connects thought to form. The Gnostics saw the Archons as inhabitants of this in-between realm, not fully material, not fully spiritual. Here they influence dreams, desires, and archetypes, shaping the collective unconscious like sculptors of shadow. Carl Jung, though writing centuries later, stumbled upon their territory when he spoke of the autonomous complexes of the psyche, fragments of personality that seem to have a will of their own. He noted that societies, too, develop these collective complexes, mass psychoses that overtake entire civilizations. In Gnostic terms, these are the fingerprints of the Archons, invisible forces moving humanity toward conformity and amnesia. Their control extends through time itself. By anchoring humanity's attention in linear perception, past and future, they prevent us from dwelling in the eternal present, where the divine spark resides. The Archons are masters of chronology. They invented the tick of the clock, the obsession with history, progress, and decay. For when consciousness identifies with time, it forgets its timeless essence. The past becomes guilt, the future becomes fear, and both feed the cycle of control. Ancient Hermetic texts hinted at this same principle. In the Corpus Hermeticum, the initiate Hermes Trismegistus describes the prison of the spheres, 7 planetary realms ruled by 7 Archons, each imprinting the soul with a vice as it descends into flesh. Only by ascending again through these spheres, mastering each illusion, can the soul return to the realm of light. To the modern seeker, this is more than mythology. It is an allegory for inner alchemy, the process of purifying consciousness from the planetary forces that bind it: greed, anger, vanity, lust, attachment, sloth, and fear. The Archons rule not only through the cosmos, but through habit. They are the inertia of mind, the automatic patterns that repeat day after day, year after year. Every routine that numbs awareness is their domain. Every addiction, every compulsion, every mechanical behavior is a microcosm of the larger prison. They are not entities waiting in the shadows. They are the patterns within us that refuse to awaken. But the Gnostics also revealed a paradox. The same forces that enslave can become the very keys to liberation. For in every illusion lies the seed of truth. When one becomes conscious of fear, it transforms into vigilance. When one observes desire without attachment, it becomes creativity. When one witnesses darkness without judgment, it becomes wisdom. The Archons, in this sense, are unknowing teachers, the adversaries that force the divine spark to remember its origin through resistance. This is the hidden beauty of the Gnostic vision. Even the false creation serves the true. Sophia's error becomes the womb of awakening. The Archon's oppression becomes the training ground for mastery. And the Demiurge, in his ignorance, unwittingly fulfills the will of the infinite. Yet knowledge without embodiment is useless. The Archons do not fear intellectual understanding. They fear lived awareness. They tremble before those who integrate knowing into being, who transform philosophy into practice. That is why every authentic spiritual path emphasizes inner discipline, silence, and direct experience. Because when you see reality as it is, the Archons lose their camouflage. They can only operate in darkness. Light makes them transparent. So how does one bring this light into daily life? How can a seeker in the digital age reclaim sovereignty over mind, emotion, and perception when the very air seems saturated with archontic influence? The answer lies not in escape, but in alignment. The soul must remember its origin, the pleroma, the boundless fullness beyond form, and act from that remembrance, even while walking through the shadowed world. In doing so, illusion collapses not through destruction, but through revelation. The Archons fade like mist under the rising sun. But to walk that path requires practice, not theory. In the next section, we will explore the practical methods by which the ancient mystics confronted the Archons directly. From mental vigilance to energetic purification, from sacred silence to acts of conscious creation. Because knowing that the Archons exist is only the beginning. Defeating them begins when you reclaim your inner throne and rule your own mind as the sovereign being you were born to be. The Archons, as ancient mystics warned, do not only rule through the stars, they rule through the mind. They whisper through thoughts, habits, and emotional patterns, embedding their dominion within the very currents of human consciousness. And yet, every tradition, from the Gnostics of Egypt to the yogis of India, preserved keys to dismantle their invisible empire. Keys that remain hidden in plain sight, disguised as spiritual discipline, self-awareness, and energetic sovereignty. To defeat the Archons is not to wage war against an external enemy. It is to remember. To remember who you are before the interference, before the noise of the world began to tell you what to think, what to want, what to fear. They do not feed on your body, but on your confusion. They thrive in the fog between your true self and the false self they helped you create. The first step, therefore, is seeing the game itself. When you notice the inner dialogue that repeats endlessly, the voices of doubt, guilt, or endless craving, you begin to recognize the parasite. These thought loops are the Archons' footprints within your psyche. Their strategy is ancient, to fragment your attention so you never awaken the totality of your awareness. Step 1. Awareness, the mirror of observation. The Gnostic texts speak of the light within the mind that cannot be darkened. This is not poetic, it is literal. Begin to observe your thoughts without becoming them. Each time you witness a negative pattern without reacting, the archonic current loses its hold. Meditation, breathwork, and focused stillness are not merely spiritual practices. They are acts of rebellion. When you sit in silence and reclaim your awareness, you are effectively starving the parasite. For the Archons cannot exist where consciousness is fully present. They exist only in the unseen corners of distraction. Try this. At any moment during your day, pause. Take a deep breath. Feel the space between your thoughts. That pause, that awareness, is the crack in the matrix. Through it, light enters and illusion dissolves. Step 2. Emotional alchemy, turning poison into power. The Archons feed on emotional distortion. Fear, anger, shame, jealousy. These are the frequencies that sustain their dominion. But here lies a secret long preserved by mystics. Emotions are not the enemy. They are raw energy, and through awareness, they can be transmuted. When you feel anger arise, do not suppress it. Transmute it. Observe it as energy in motion, without labeling it bad. Breathe into it until it changes form, from heat into clarity, from turmoil into strength. The alchemists called this process solve et coagula, dissolve and reform. To master one's emotions is to reclaim the throne of the inner kingdom. The Archons lose power when your emotional state becomes self-directed rather than externally triggered. Step 3. Energetic sovereignty, guarding the temple of light. Every culture once taught the art of energy control. Qigong in China, pranayama in India, Hermetic breathing in Egypt. All shared one truth. That life force can be cultivated, refined, and directed by will. When your energy body is coherent, archonic interference weakens. Begin by working with your breath. Slow it down, deepen it. Visualize each inhale as golden light entering your solar plexus, the seat of personal power. Each exhale releases stagnant frequencies, anxiety, confusion, fatigue. As your breath steadies, imagine a radiant field of light surrounding your entire being. This is not fantasy. It is the electromagnetic manifestation of your consciousness. With daily practice, it becomes a living armor, shielding you from energetic parasites and psychic manipulation. Step 4. Information diet, reclaiming mental space. The Archons have adapted to the digital age. They now thrive in the endless scroll, in distraction disguised as entertainment. Every image, every outrage, every trend demands your attention, fragmenting your awareness into consumable data. To defeat modern Archons, one must fast from mental noise. Unplug regularly. Choose what you allow into your mind with the same care as what you eat. Engage with knowledge that elevates, that nourishes rather than drains. You are not your feed. You are the consciousness that chooses what to feed upon. This is not withdrawal. It is purification. By controlling your input, you reclaim authorship of your inner narrative. Step 5. Alignment, living from the higher self. When the Gnostics spoke of liberation from the Archons, they were not describing escapism. They were describing integration. To remember your divine origin is to act in accordance with it. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions align with truth, the Archons can no longer deceive you. Practice integrity in small things. Speak truth when silence would be more convenient. Follow your intuition, even when reason hesitates. Every act of authenticity reweaves the divine pattern within you and weakens the false grid that binds humanity. This is the ultimate rebellion. To live consciously in a world engineered to keep you asleep. Through awareness, alchemy, energy mastery, mental discipline, and alignment, you become the living antithesis of the Archonic agenda. You cease to be a pawn in their cosmic game, and instead become a player of light. This is the inner revolution the Gnostics foresaw, not a war fought with weapons, but with awakening. When you reclaim your mind, the Archons vanish, not because they are destroyed, but because you have stepped beyond their reach. The battlefield is not out there. It has always been within. The Archons were never gods, only shadows cast by the forgotten brilliance of human consciousness. They rule through deception, through the illusion that you are powerless, alone, disconnected from the divine source. But the moment you remember, their dominion dissolves like smoke in sunlight. This is the great remembering, the return to the knowing that has always lived within you. It is not knowledge you acquire. It is knowledge you uncover. The Gnostics called it gnosis, direct experience of truth beyond belief, beyond the machinery of control. When you awaken to this remembrance, you realize that the Archons were never outside of you. They were the echoes of unawareness, the residual shadows of a consciousness that forgot its own magnitude. They are the distortion, not the source. Humanity has always been on this journey, from the blindness of the cave to the light of revelation. Every age has its Archons, its mechanisms of manipulation, its distractions dressed as progress. And yet, in every age, a few awaken. They pierce the veil, reclaim their inner fire, and carry the torch of truth forward. Perhaps you, too, are one of them, a soul who remembers the whispers of another time. It is your higher self knocking on the door of your awareness, urging you to wake up. To defeat the Archons is not an act of destruction. It is an act of illumination. You do not need to fight darkness. You only need to see it for what it is. When light returns, shadows flee naturally. Every moment of self-awareness, every act of compassion, every breath taken in conscious stillness weakens the web of control. The Archons cannot survive in a mind filled with clarity or a heart vibrating with truth. Their reign depends on ignorance, and you, by simply remembering, end their empire. So perhaps this was never a story about ancient entities at all. Perhaps it has always been about you, the sleeper who becomes the dreamer who becomes awake, and the awakened one who remembers that they were never asleep. In the silence beyond thought, you will feel it, the pulse of something ancient, luminous, and free. That is your true nature. That is the essence the Archons tried to bury beneath distraction, fear, and division. But the soul cannot be buried forever. The real victory is quiet. It is the moment you no longer react to the world's chaos, but respond with presence. The moment you realize that freedom was never taken, only forgotten. And so, the invitation is simple. Watch your thoughts as they rise. Guard your attention as sacred. Speak truth even when trembling. And live as if every moment is a chance to remember what you really are. A spark of the infinite, here to reclaim the forgotten kingdom within. The Archons fall not through war, but through awareness. And awareness begins now. If these words have resonated with you, if something within you stirs with recognition, you are not alone. This is a movement of remembrance. So I invite you to join this exploration, to subscribe, to share your insight, to walk beside others who seek the same truth. The labyrinth is deep, but the light within you is deeper still. Until next time, remember who you are, and let the Archons fade into silence,